We're coming up to the centenary of the 1916 Rising, and as we discussed before, everybody knows what happens in town, what happened at the GPO, what happened in the city centre, Stephen's Green, City Hall. But a lot of people don't know what happened in their own area, and a lot of people never realise what happened in this.
Cassaithe. I'm the primary school teacher in St Joseph's Co-ed in Eastwall. Yeah, we had three classes. We had 4th, 5th and 6th. And the Eastwall History Group arranged for us to do a walk-in tour. This is actually the 4th time that they had arranged to do it, but because of the lovely weather we have here in Ireland, it had to keep getting rescheduled, and eventually we got there, and I think the children were very excited that we ended up actually going outside this time. So yeah, it was last Friday. We went up to Annesley Bridge to have a look at remnants of 1916 and to listen to the story of the Battle of Dublin. We brought approximately 55 kids with us, and they really enjoyed it.
The main thing that happened in this area was the battle at Annesley Bridge, and we're going to go up to Annesley Bridge and we'll walk around, and I'm going to show you where the British soldiers were, where the Irish volunteers were, where the Citizen Army were, and where the shooting took place.
I've already come to school with an awful lot of history. It's kind of something that a lot of people tend to overlook, but they've got ideas about 1916 already. They know the bare bones of what happened. They know the names of the main characters involved. So I suppose it's just building up on that, on the knowledge that they have already, and putting a more coherent picture for them, or together for them, so that not only do they know one of the most important and iconic events of our own history, but they can relate it to what happened locally.
Just going to talk a little bit about the school and some of the people here that might have been involved. This picture was taken in 1898. It's the oldest picture we have of the school, or of schoolboys from Eastwall. This is what the school looked like originally. It was a one-storey building here, and this one was built in 1961. So when the Rising broke out on Easter week in 1916, the John's Ambulance Brigade had ambulances going around the city helping the wounded and moving the dead. He was one of the men involved in that, and he was in the city centre. He was on O'Connell Street in around the GPO during Easter week. So that's the school principal who was involved in the Rising.
But the type of history we're trying to teach in school is kind of a source-based history, where children are exploring lots of different interpretations and perspectives of 1916. So they're not just looking at the Irish end of things. They're looking at different issues around 1916. So you do have to be kind of careful, because it is very easy to fall into the trap of that stereotypical kind of history, and it is one that children would remember very quickly. But not only that, it would kind of perpetuate that idea of the stereotyping idea. So I suppose there's a conscious effort to move away from that type of history, to teach a more kind of general perspective of everybody that was involved, looking at things from different points of view. It can be quite challenging, but it's also very rewarding as well.
So we'll head up to Fairview Park. Okay, sorry, I should have explained before we left. I think people probably remember from the last time. There's a documentary being made about how areas celebrated 1916. During the week at one stage, a man living in one of those houses made his way around into the manure factory, kind of went up and knocked on the door and asked who was in charge, got the man in charge and said, every time your men shoot, you're hitting the back of my house. Will you tell them to be more careful? So he said, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. That's not what we were trying to do. So we went back in and said, when you're shooting, will you make sure you shoot over the houses, don't be hitting them. And now we're going to go over to that house there, number 4, and I'm going to tell you what happened in there to one of the families that had no involvement with the Rising, but suffered badly because of it. Now,
I think in general there's kind of a disassociation from kind of sensitive things as well. Unfortunately they see it around, they see it in video games, they see it on TV, and so what might have been considered horrific at one stage is not quite as hard hitting now. But yeah, there is a it's kind of important as well to develop that sense of empathy with children so that they can kind of relate to like the absolute horrors that did happen during 1916, the terror that families would have felt, and the heartbreak when loved ones died and so on. Like you can't ignore that end of history either, because then you're given a kind of a sterile view of history. You know, you need those human stories.
This is number 4 Annesley Bridge Road. You can see it in the picture here. It looks pretty much the same. The family that lived here were called the McCullochs. For the whole week, the family were trapped in the house. From Monday until Thursday, the family were trapped in the house. Mr. Moore tried to run back in, and as he got into the hall, he was hit in the back of that neck and fell on the floor in there. Mr. Moore died on the way in. And the family spent the rest of that week hiding in the kitchen under the table, as far as I know, with no food. Sorry.
So they were able to sort of place it to kind of in chronology, like, you know, it's not my parents, it's my great-grandparents and so on, and to put names on places. We've had a few children who have come in with stories like that their granny hid weapons for Michael Collins. I think about 6 or 7 of the children have said that, you know, and I think that's general for the population anyway. Nearly everybody's granny did something for Michael Collins. But little stories like members of Commemoration, members of the volunteers and so on. And then one child came in and she said, yeah, my granddad said his relatives were robbing stuff out of the shops. Which I thought was brilliant, because I reckon my own were too.
Okay, so what happens is the British are running down the Wharf Road, as it was called, the East Wall Road. The guys from the top of the road are running down, and they all get to here. The main fighting on Easter Monday, that was the Battle of Annesley Bridge, happened here. The 7 men who ran down, ran out here. This was all, it would have been muddy. You can see it here, it's muddy, dirty, there's a little bit of building going on. They all ran out and basically stopped here. But we do know here, 7 men took on 130 to 150 British soldiers, and you can see in the picture the British soldiers were running. Eventually the British get reinforcements and they set machine guns up along the railway, and that really brings us to the end of what happened here. I asked for 7 volunteers. For the sake of the cameras and the documentary, run, run!
And that's part of what history is. It's about making connections, whether it's locally or whether it's on a more national level. And I like the idea of teaching kind of local history to explore national events, and that's a perfect opportunity. So we're looking at local involvement, we're looking at family involvement, we're looking at all the connections that children can make to 1916, and it's powerful stuff, really.
So when people talk about how many people from East Wall were involved, there was quite a few, but more importantly, the British were so afraid of us that they wouldn't come through this area, and the rising lasted for a long time.
But what it has done is, like, basically your epistemic beliefs are, you know, what are your kind of inherent beliefs about the nature of things, the nature of knowing and how you know things and so on. So I've been interviewing them over the last few weeks over, you know, what they think history is, where does it come from, how do historians go about their job, what's the nature of history, how do we know what we know, and so on. And quite a few of them have made reference to 1916 because it's a big topic that we've been talking about, and they've made connections with, you know, you have to know what has happened before in order to understand what's happening now. You know, which is quite deep for children, you know, to make that kind of connection. They make the connection between, you know, the lives that we live now in comparison to the lives that were lived, you know, in the early 1900s. And then some of them see kind of a, you know, not only democracy, citizenship, but, you know, that sense of continuity as well. Like, so there's a lot going on there in children's minds. We sort of don't dig deep enough sometimes and kind of gloss over it, but when you stop and listen to them, you know, they're quite deep little creatures, really. You know.